home is a big undertaking, from picking a realtor to touring homes to financing the purchase. Each step presents its own set of challenges. For disabled homebuyers, those challenges are often bigger and trickier to navigate. However, the Fair Housing Act, FHA, and the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, are in place to ensure individuals with disabilities have equal access to home buying opportunities. Today, we're talking to Mia Ives-Rublee, Director of the Disability Justice Initiative at American Progress. The Disability Justice Initiative promotes policies to ensure disabled people of color and those most marginalized by ableism and other forms of oppression can participate in the economy and our democracy. Before coming to American Progress, Mia advocated for disability justice and inclusion in nonprofit organizations and businesses across the U.S. She worked with the Women's March, Families Belong Together, DC Action Lab, Adoptees for Justice, Fair Fight, People's Collective for Justice and Liberation, and numerous other progressive organizations. Best known for founding the Women's March Disability Caucus, Mia helped organize the original Women's March on Washington in 2017. The Women's March was one of the first large-scale events to have certified deaf interpreters on stage. Mia worked to push for better access to disability accommodations at progressive events and more policy platforms inclusive of the disability community. Mia is a disabled, transracial adoptee and an athlete who has dedicated her life's work to civil rights activism for disabled people, immigrants, and other marginalized communities. Thank you for being here today on the podcast and also speaking with our Realtor members and participating in Canopy's Fair Housing Celebration and Challenge. I know our members will appreciate hearing your experiences and insight into the challenges, best practices, and opportunities of working with clients with disabilities and bringing awareness to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Later on the program, I will talk with Bryan Perkins, Canopy MLS Broker Relations Manager, who leads Canopy MLS's training team. He's been training realtors on how to use the MLS for more than 20 years and counting, and is best known in the realtor community as the guy that helps. He'll talk with us about how realtors can better assist the disabled in the search for a home. Thank you for both being here today. Thank you for both being here today. Mia, your background is so interesting. I actually remember that Women's March. It was quite powerful to see thousands of women gather in one place to support gender equality and civil rights. Tell us how you got into this work.
Oh, man. I got into the work really, I think it really began in the fact that I grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina, where the history of certain parts of the civil rights movement happened, including the sit-ins at the Woolworths department and, SNCC, which was part of A&T and UNCG. And I think that, that created sort of a foundation, along with the fact that my parents were very, very adamant about just empathizing with others and how they struggle, and also being an adoptee, being an immigrant, having a disability. All of those things really made it so that I felt like I had to, because I knew that I had a lot of advantages living in the family that I did, getting the support that I did from my parents and my community, that I felt like I had to give back, And so, I had spent years doing direct service at vocational rehabilitation services, helping people with mental health disabilities obtain employment in the Triangle area. And I just felt like I wasn't doing enough in my community, and really wanted to think about things on a more macro scale, and figuring out how I can solve issues on a more macro scale. So I sort of made a commitment to myself that I was going to do more community organizing, and that really sort of started my pathway. I saw a posting online about the Women's March, and I was like, all right, I'm just gonna sort of jump in head first and start doing whatever I can.
As a follow-up to that question, can you explain what the Disability Justice Initiative does?
Yeah, I work within a think tank, and a think tank is basically a nonprofit organization that analyzes different policies, and it can be anything from state and local policies, laws, regulations, to federal policies, laws and regulations, and it sometimes even looks internationally. But the Disability Justice Initiative is a part of a think tank. The think tank is called the Center for American Progress. And so what we do, we're basically the first disability-centered initiative at a general think tank. And we focus on how disability intersects with a lot of different policy areas. And so we look at anything from housing, of course, to things like the economy and healthcare and employment. We look at a wide range of issues and see how we can adjust policies and rules and regulations to improve the lives of disabled people, to make sure that they can live in their communities and feel like they can, be able to participate in their communities.
Okay. Well, we're in a climate now and hearing more and more that people are tired of DEI initiatives and training. We have state governments like those in Florida and Texas that are basically saying that focusing on diversity and inclusion initiatives is discriminatory, and that these initiatives are no longer needed. How do we counter this? How do we let people know that, yes, we have come a long way in trying to create equality for all, but that we are still not quite there yet? When we think of diversity and inclusion, what comes to mind for most people is race and gender equality. But fair housing laws tell us that it is more than that. We need to be mindful of religious discrimination, national origin, physical and mental handicaps. Our very own Canopy Realtor Association has a diversity, equity, and inclusion alliance, and has been intentional about taking steps to ensure that diversity is reflected in our leadership. How do we go about making sure that we are including the disabled with sensitivity that is even as an industry, and welcome more agents who are living with disabilities into the real estate business?
Yeah, those are great questions. I think, in terms of the pushback on DEI, I think that there's been a real misunderstanding of what DEI is. And it's, a lot of folks, they utilize these talking points that really decontextualize what we're trying to do, which is to provide resources for people who have historically faced a lot of barriers to entering specific fields, to entering specific communities, to feeling like they belong in a specific area. And, I think a lot of people, if you're not a part of a marginalized community, it's really hard to understand how alienating it can feel like when you don't see people like yourself represented. I think about the time when I was growing up in Greensboro, North Carolina, in school, and not seeing any disabled people, represented anywhere, right? It's only been recently that we've seen more disabled actors, we've seen more disabled people, more disabled athletes, etc., in the media today. And for me, it was, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up because I had no mentors, I had no models of people who could show me the way. What did it look like to be an adult with a disability? And so DEI, what it does is it provides individuals who are in those situations a chance to have role models, a chance to understand what resources are out there, and a chance to gain equal footing. That is all we're looking for, is equal footing in different areas of society. And so when you talk to people about what DEI is all about, and you help to sort of contextualize it a little more and create more empathy about what people are facing, I tend to see more people being like, oh, I didn't realize that. I didn't think about that. And it's part of sort of the foundation of organizing, really, is to try and take policy, take programs that may be misunderstood and help people better understand it so that we can gain more support for these types of programs and activities. In terms of being more inclusive of disabled people and thinking about how to ensure that they can participate in society and participate in different fields, I think it's essential to understand that disabled people have the same wants and the same needs as non-disabled people. And we start there, right? Because so often we infantilize disabled people and say, well, they have to be taken care of, or they don't understand X, or they're too poor to do Y, right? And that sort of perspective ensures that these individuals don't get the same opportunities as everybody else. And so I think re-engaging with how we think about disabled people, addressing our own ableism, our own internalized ableism, is really the first step. And then we go from that to actually communicating with actual disabled people. Because a lot of times people who are talking about disability, they don't actually interact with disabled people. They are sort of these folks who call themselves speaking for the voiceless. But these people, disabled people, aren't voiceless, right? We have voices. And it's just the fact that a lot of people aren't uplifting those voices that means that, we've become voiceless because society and maybe even yourself have ensured that they remain voiceless. So I think those are sort of the two first steps that we have to take in order to be more inclusive of disabled people, is ensure that they are fully included throughout all levels of, different fields, different organizations, etc., and that they're represented just as any other minority group wants to be represented.
All right. As a disability policy director, based on your general knowledge of our industry, if you had to grade our industry as to whether we do a good job or are we truly a partner of the disabled, how would you score us or grade us? Do we get an A or a B or something else? And then how do we take steps to improve?
Yeah, I think there's an interesting sort of dilemma within the realtor business. And I think it's because of some of the historical context, which I think, many racial minorities also similarly face, is that it's been so or not even anti, but just not inclusive of disabled people that it's very hard to change that structure. And so, the fact that you all are bringing in disabled people to speak at events, I think shows a level of reflection that is needed. So I would say a C+, so doing a little better than normal, in the fact that, you all are reaching out to disabled people, trying to have conversations with them. And I think I've heard more and more about disabled people who are realtors now that, we are seeing a slow change within the field. And that's a great thing, I think that we all have an opportunity to grow and be more inclusive and to address the issues that disabled people face. But I think, our housing stock right now, one, we just don't have enough, right? We all hear about the fact that we just don't have enough housing stock. And part of that was because of the housing bust that happened, and then we stopped building and the population continued to grow. And so we just, even if we filled many of the office buildings with people who need access to housing, we'd still not have enough housing for everybody. So, we're dealing with a housing crisis. We're also dealing with an accessibility crisis. There are more and more disabled people out in society, and there are, I think the estimate is right now is less than 6% of our housing stock are accessible. So what does a disabled person who wants to become a realtor do when they can't even show a house to their clients because the house isn't accessible? And they want to show clients with disabilities specifically that. I had an interesting conversation with somebody who was a realtor. I was trying to sell my house, and their first response was, there's no market for this. But the funny thing is that as soon as we put it on the listing, that it was an accessible location, that had specific accommodations, we got 10, 11 requests and in a weekend. And she looked at me afterwards, after we had sold, and she was like, I guess I was wrong. There is a housing need for disabled people. And I was like, yes, 100%. Not only are people aging and they want to live in their communities, but there's also disabled people who just, they want housing. And so, our healthcare is a mess right now. And so more and more people are not going to the doctor, which means their conditions are getting worse, which means they're becoming disabled. And so we've seen a 10% increase in disability in the last 4 years and only a 3% increase in population.
Well, as a follow-up to that, what organizations locally should we be partnering with to ensure that we are doing the best we can working with people with disabilities?
Yeah, there are some great organizations that are either nonprofit organizations or even government-based departments. And one of the places that I would highly suggest is to talk to independent living. Those guys are people who are trying to help individuals find housing. There are individuals that find housing for disabled people. They deal with, on a daily basis, trying to get disabled people to be able to live in their communities. And so that's a great opportunity to communicate with professionals who are working in the field, and also their consumers. Another place that you could, or another group that you could talk to is the disability rights. I forgot, it's North Carolina Disability Rights, which is a legal firm that, or a legal organization that provides legal advice to disabled people and does lawsuits on issues around, failing to meet ADA guidelines or 504 guidelines in the Rehabilitation Act. So they're another great organization to work with. And then there's several, disability sports community organizations that are around as well. And that means you get to work with youth who have disabilities, who are eventually going to need housing once they graduate from high school or graduate from college. So there's a lot of great groups out there that you can get involved with. And then there's also the Family Support Network, which works with disabled or families with children with disabilities, because it's not only disabled adults that need accessible housing, but families who have disabled children also need accessible housing.
All right. And thinking about the real estate business, all realtors have the responsibility to uphold the policies of the Fair Housing Act. Part of that duty means ensuring homebuyers have equal access to real estate offices, information, properties, and programs. Mm-hmm. And as part of Title III of the ADA, real estate offices and the services conducted within them are required to be accessible to individuals with disabilities. Any architectural or communication barriers that might inhibit an individual's access to the building or services should be removed. What should agents be thinking about regarding accessibility and challenges for those with disabilities, whether blind, deaf, or physical disabilities when it comes to housing? And how can we better market ourselves so that the disabled will see us as trusted housing advocate?
That is an excellent question. I think that one of the biggest challenges that I had when I was looking for housing, not only was there a difficulty that my realtor was working in a location that was inaccessible, but also looking at specific MLS listings and not being able to figure out what was accessible and what wasn't. And so it meant that we had to go on location to figure out if it would work for me, right? Because I think what people don't realize is disabled people have different needs. Some people may need a no-step location, so has absolutely no steps. But there are other people who are like, hey, I can deal with one step. I could put a ramp in there, or I have the opportunity to be able to do that. And then some people are like, I don't mind stairs. What I mind is like low light areas. Does it have enough lighting in the house? Because my vision is bad, right? So one is to realize that disabled people aren't a monolith. To realize that the more descriptive you are on your MLS listing, including anything that you think could benefit somebody with specific needs, like lighting needs or thinking about how many steps there are, those are going to help disabled people feel Like they can make some decisions on whether a specific listing could work for them. And it means that it's going to be a lot less work, not only on the disabled person, but also on the realtor, right? So, you know, I spent a lot of time just going from listing to listing, even going onto Google Maps and trying to figure out how many steps are in the front. You know, what does the backyard look like? What is, you know, the neighborhood look like? Because that's also a big component for me and for most people is like, is the community even accessible? You know, are there sidewalks? You know, are there a bunch of obstructions in the way that somebody who's blind may not be able to navigate the location just because it's too unsafe for them? Maybe there's too much construction in the area, etc. So I think it's great if you can be as descriptive as possible, understanding that some people may not be able to see the photos. And so descriptions, we call them image descriptions, but being able to provide as much description as possible. And it's not just like, oh, it has, you know, three bedrooms and one very modern kitchen or something like that, or a luxury kitchen. It's literally like, hey, this is the width of the doorways. This is how many steps there are. Great lighting in X location, or backyard that has a lot of room or something like that. And then when you're talking about the community, because a lot of times there's like community scores or stuff like that you can say, oh, you know, the community is very accessible. There's a lot of sidewalks. You're able to get to a grocery store really easily, etc. So those are some of the ways that you can be very helpful and be an ally to the disability community. But I think also providing some education to disabled people on the financing, because a lot of disabled people don't have access to that because people don't assume disabled people have any money, right? There's this assumption that all disabled people have no money. They're not going to want to buy a house. They're always going to either rent or live in some group home. And so we often aren't targeted for learning about financial responsibility, learning about how to get a loan, how to get a home loan. You know, all of these little factors, like being able to, as your organizations here, being able to reach out to these communities and be like, hey, we can offer a seminar for your clientele on what it would look like to buy a house.
As I wrap up with you on the lighter side, your bio says that you're an athlete. What sports do you compete in?
Oh, I don't compete as much as I used to. But when I was younger, I did a lot of competitions. I'm a very competitive person. It's pretty obvious whenever I am even playing board games. I am a very competitive individual. And so I started in track and field, and then went and was semi-forced into swimming. I did not like swimming, but I did it for the team because we got team points. So I did swimming. Luckily, I did not drown. And then I also did wheelchair basketball, which if you've never been to a wheelchair basketball game, you gotta go. There's a great team local to Charlotte Hornets. Although, are they called the Bobcats now?
No, they're back to the Hornets.
Okay, so Charlotte Hornets, they have a local team here. They play games all the time. It is a wild time. You see chairs slamming into each other. It's almost similar to murder ball, but for basketball, if you've ever seen that movie. And so I did basketball for a little while. I went to college, University of Illinois, and did track and road racing. Was on my way to qualifying for the Paralympics, but got injured, unfortunately. And it just knocked me out of being able to do it. And so I went and started doing fencing. So I got into fencing for a couple of years. Yeah. I absolutely love playing with swords. It's a great way to get rid of your frustration. So I love doing saber and foil. Those were my two weapons of choice. And then and I got to compete in Budapest, which was really cool. And then I went and did CrossFit for a while. So I've done quite a few different types of sports. Now, for the most part, I do a lot of paddleboarding. Feels a little better on my body and my mind.
All right. I think I'm going to have to take up that fencing and see what that feels like to get some of that frustration.
Oh, man. Yeah. It's fantastic.
I love it. Well, Mia, thank you so much for everything today and being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Wow, that is awesome. I know Bryan loves sports. He's an avid disc golfer. Bryan, thanks for being here with us for this conversation. The last question and Mia's answer brings me to you as our broker relations manager, trainer extraordinaire, and the guide that helps us. What do agents need to know about searching the MLS for clients with disabilities and whether the tools that we use are ADA compliant?
First, I'd like to say thank you for allowing me to come into this conversation. I'm so honored to be involved, and again, thanks for the invite. Since 2017, we've had a list of specific options that's grown to a list of 42 accessibility features for listing input and searching, many of these based on subscriber requests. These range from specific counter height and light switch heights to tactile and visual markers to bath scald control faucets. Other features that might also be helpful to list or search might be connected to a community area such as an elevator or ramps in a clubhouse. Also, searching and adding keywords in the remarks that describe a specific accessibility feature of a home might be an option as well. Once listings are found and sent, the One Home Client Portal is an accessible and collaborative site where a customer of Canopy MLS Realtor views listings sent from the MLS system. Our MLS system itself has also had recent changes that make it more accessible for the disabled realtor. Selecting from 3 different font sizes, dark or light mode on the Canopy dashboard, and responsive display of a native system all help with accessibility. Our Canopy family of websites is also currently going through changes to be more accessible. As we speak, we have several dedicated staff working diligently, as this is a priority of the entire Canopy team. Canopy MLS is seeing lots of advancement and focus on accessibility across many of the products that we currently offer. Accessibility is a top priority with all new software vendors, and definitely something our advisory group and board of directors consider when interviewing new partners.
This sounds like agents actually have the tools at hand to form a niche if we wanted to, and to really market to buyers and sellers who are living with disabilities. How can agents learn more about the tools? Do you cover this in training?
We're always training on Matrix functionality as well as other product offerings. These can be online, on demand, and we would also customize a training and bring it to your member offices and events. You can find our schedule on our new broker relations website, launched last week, brokerrelations.canopyrealtors.com, or reach out to us at brokerrelations@canopyrealtors.com. Again, brokerrelations@canopyrealtors.com.
Thanks, Bryan. This is great information. And thank you, Mia, for being here with us today. The work you do is absolutely needed, and we are grateful for the information you shared today. This is such timely information for Fair Housing Month. Discrimination distorts the housing market and closes the door on the American dream of home ownership for qualified buyers. Having a realtor community and a network willing to uphold strong fair housing laws and practices only makes for a stronger economy and community. Thanks so much for joining the conversation.
You're listening to Inside the Canopy Files, a production of Canopy Realtor Association. Canopy Realtor Association is a trade association that provides more than 16,000 realtor members with the resources and services they need to conduct ethical, professional, successful, and profitable businesses. The association is dedicated to being the region's primary resource for the residential real estate information, and it owns and operates Canopy MLS, which has more than 20,000 subscribers and is the private cooperative realtors use for access to tens of thousands of residential listings in a 24-county service area, including Charlotte, the mountains area of North Carolina, South Carolina, and beyond. And we want to hear from you. Please visit us at canopyrealtors.com and connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Canopy Realtor, and listen to our podcast on your favorite platform. And hey, give us a 5-star rating. Send us your feedback and comments to president@canopyrealtors.com. Thanks again for listening to Inside the Canopy Files. We'll see you next time. Inside the Canopy Files is produced by Canopy's Marketing and Communications Department and Andy Go of Gojo Studios.